Writing is one thing, reading it to everybody is something else. This is a little slice of life story that happened 20-some years ago when we were visiting my in-laws up in Pennsylvania. It's called Breakfast Grace. Timmy, my mother-in-law, stuck her head into the den and summoned me. "Sheldon, it's time for you to do the eggs." I put down the sports section of the Sunday Allentown Morning Call and left the guys to join the ladies in the kitchen. 10 years ago or so, I had, in a rash act of helpfulness, volunteered to cook the scrambled eggs for breakfast. The chore had become a permanent part of my son-in-law job description. In the kitchen, the ladies were busy with their assigned task. My daughter Kathy was sorting the freshly cut fruit into individual glass bowls. No bananas for kid brother Steve, no grapefruit for Bob, or Pop-Pop, and extra strawberries for me. She may have officially become a teenager last month, but at least as of this week, she still liked to look after Daddy. Soon the eggs were cooked and everyone was being seated at the old round oak kitchen table. The custom-crafted Lazy Susan in the center was laden with bacon, sticky buns, Moravian sugar cake, raisin and whole wheat toast, and natural peanut butter from the farmer's market. I served the eggs on each person's plate as Timmy helped Bob into his chair. "Who's the boy?" he asked, looking at Steve. "That's your grandson, Steve. You know Steve," Timmy said. Truth was, he didn't know Steve. He didn't know any of us anymore except Timmy. Bob had suffered a series of brain incidents over the past few years that had left him with impaired motor skills, practically no memory, and precious little intellect. Kathy took the seat on Pop-Up's right, and I sat on the other side of her. Timmy had buttered some toast for Bob and was leaning over his shoulder, cutting his eggs and bacon into small pieces and mixing them together. "Don't cut the bacon so small," Bob snapped. "Let me do it." "You'll get half of it on the floor," she said as she kept cutting. The argument over the appropriate size for bits of bacon continued and sounded refreshingly like old times. Spousal banter must reside in some primal section of the brain that is immune to all but the most serious of ravages. Other times, watching the two of them share a sweet moment, I thought that love must live there too. When Timmy had taken her seat, she asked Bob to say grace. I fried the eggs. Bob said grace, always. All conversation stopped and we bowed our heads. After a beat or two of uncomfortable silence, Timmy gently prompted Bob with, "God is." Bob tried. "God is." Then after another long pause, both Kathy and Steve helped their Pop-Up by joining in with, "Great. God is good, and we thank him for this food." A chorus of amens followed, and conversation immediately resumed around the table as we started serving ourselves from the dishes in front of us. I glanced up to my left and saw Bob's head was still bowed, and he appeared to be mumbling something. Kathy leaned closer to him. She put her hand on his back just below his neck and started rubbing, almost caressing him. Her hand gradually worked its way across to his distant shoulder, and the caress dissolved into a hug as she laid her head on his arm. Her other hand dropped to cover his folded ones on the table. And she raised her face and softly, ever so tenderly, brushed a kiss over his cheek. As if awakened by something magical, Bob lifted his head and smiled at her. But the spell was broken in an instant and the smile disappeared. He picked up his fork and attacked the mixture of bacon and eggs on his plate, spilling bits and pieces of the mixture on himself and the table. The moment between Kathy and her Pop-Up had passed so quickly that no one seemed to have noticed. I touched her on the back and asked, "Kat, what happened?" As she turned away from Bob and twisted around towards me, I saw that she was trying to bat away tears that were forming in the corner of her eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded yes and said, "I couldn't hear what he was saying at first, but as I leaned closer, I got so I could make it out. First a word or two, then all of it. She hesitated, gathering herself, and then continued. He was praying the same thing over and over. He just kept repeating, God, don't forget me. God, don't forget me. God, don't forget me. She held my eyes with hers in spite of the tears that were beginning to overflow and roll down her cheeks. She moved even closer and whispered, he knows what's happening to him. She sniffled a few times, swallowed deeply, and then in something between a sigh and a moan said, oh, Daddy.